Hey, everybody. Hope everybody is doing well today. It's been a while since I really have made any videos. I've had some technical issues. I got busy. I got caught up, changing jobs, everything is changing places. Just a really long story. I hope everybody is doing well. My goodness, what an intense monsoon season we've had. Heavy rain for the last 2 days. And it's not just here, it's all over the Southwest. I know about a week or so ago, Hurricane Hillary made landfall here, and it brought so many inches of rain, not just here, but a lot more across Southern California. I mean, remember, Southern California is known to have hardly any rainfall, especially along the coast during the summertime. I guess we're really starting to have a drought booster, which the question is, which much of the country is getting all this rainfall, could that translate to lower food prices? But we'll have to talk about that a little later. I mean, a lot of these grounds got flooded. The office parking lot that I work at has turned into a lake. The streets have turned into rivers. It's just unbelievable. And I got to tell you, they tell you if the level of flooding is above 1 feet, you want to just stay away from floodwaters because it just what could happen to your car. It's unbelievable. There's a lot of mess out there. They're trying to clean it up. And as a matter of fact, yesterday they closed a portion of Interstate 15 from Jean to Prim, which makes you think that, well, they should have alternative routes. Or as a matter of fact, we'll see if that this whole Brightline high-speed train that's going to get built is actually going to make a difference. Now, I wanted to really get into some topics, which is the Nevada state legislature. And as you know, there have been a lot of scandals recently. Again, this is the way it works. A lot of us don't trust the election process. And I'm not going to get into depth of that because if I do, YouTube is going to take down this video. And not to mention, more importantly, and obviously something that more of us can agree, is that the political machine in the state is such a mess. We've got the casino elites, these mega developers, which are in bed with the unions, Culinary, namely. They have so much power, they have so much manipulation. And by the way, they did get some public funds, taxpayer funds. This is just absolutely unbelievable. Yet they can't tell us we can't use these public funds for private schools. So they use this as a machine to essentially, when you think about it, to select our politicians. And what happens as a result is that we basically don't have much of a say in exactly what's going on. But because of our system is so dirty, because these politicians are so out of touch, especially with the events that happened in the last 3 years with the lockdowns, mandates, and so forth, we're seeing a lot of scandals that are really beginning to emerge. And a lot of these scandals have to do with the fact that they're taking public money and they're giving it to private funds. And you look at many of these reporting agencies, outlets, I think it's a Review Journal, the Twitter page of Nevada War Room. You look at C.H. Miller, you look at Teresa May Brown, you look at Michelle Gorlo, and a lot of these people I've seen, they're not people that you could easily get along, easily talk to. They like to hear differences of opinions. They're having town halls where they're willing to talk to people. You know, when they do things like that, you know it really reveals their true colors. The Jays video, yeah, I'll have to look into that. Thanks for actually letting me know. But you can see exactly how these people are. And then, by the way, my friend Sandra Hernandez, believe it or not, one of the things that happened was she ran against an assemblywoman, Rochelle Nguyen. And if you don't know where that district is, that's just west of downtown Las Vegas. It's along Charleston Boulevard, Valley View, Decatur, and so forth. Well, she didn't even, the opponent the incumbent, didn't even run in her district. So what happened was, after the election, which they claim, of course, she got reelected because of the mail-in votes, the state senator, who also is around that district, Chris Brooks, which I've met him, he's not an easy to get along guy. And by the way, Rochelle Nguyen, she's the woman who, by the way, introduced the anti-Airbnb bill, which got struck down in the courts. What she did was she got reappointed days after the election that Chris Brooks resigned to work for a green energy company. And you see, you have to understand this is the problem with appointments rather than special elections, because they can rig the system. They don't have to actually campaign for the state Senate seat. One can actually resign, they get appointed, and they basically do less work for what it's supposed to be done. You basically know how the structure is so rigged and manipulated. Now, just going back to this whole idea of public money being used for private funds, it's just such BS. It's pretty much money laundering, I can tell you that. Money laundering is something that can happen in so many different places that you can ever imagine. It's absolutely ridiculous. So what this means is that you look at an assemblywoman like Michelle Gorlow. If you don't know where her district is, it's along the Southern Highlands district, about 10 miles or so south of the Strip, 5-10 miles. And now, because it's been proven that she's been taking money to put it in a private organization, which actually employed her, believe it or not, employed her. What ended up happening was, when the word got out, she announced that she's not going to run for re-election. You have to remember that she ran in a very competitive district. This district was essentially ran on a very thin margin. As a Democrat, she won. And some people argue that the reason she did win was because there was a libertarian candidate, Mindy Robinson, who, as you know, she's an actress. And I met her actually last week at the Reawakening tour, which I'll upload the videos about what happened. We seem to be very active, expose a lot of things. She ran as a libertarian, and many argue that took votes from the Republican. Now, of course, the question is, why did she do that? Well, she did it because the Republican Party really screwed her up when she was running for Congress. And as you know, a lot of people don't like the Nevada GOP, Michael McDonald, and so forth, but I'll have to do a video about that later on. So anyway, she got in, and then she took money from public funds and gave it to a private firm that basically hired her. And this is the same happening with C.H. Miller, and I believe I've been hearing about that from another assemblywoman, Teresa May Brown. Her district is west of the Strip, and my other friend ran against her. It's and by the way, she was appointed too. That's actually before, when the assemblyman Alexander Asefa, who was Ethiopian, believe it or not, he had to resign, or I think he got arrested because of other scandals. See, this is what happens when you keep appointing people. This is what happens under our political machine. How many resignations, how many of these scandals have to unfold until we finally begin to realize that these people are crooked, they don't have your best interest. The people in bodies don't really represent the best interest in mind. Not to mention, we have to hold these donors and these NGOs accountable who are responsible for pumping these politicians. And by the way, a lot of these politicians are really in trouble because a lot of people are frustrated that the school choice bill, and not to mention the A Stadium plan, got executed. And yet, what's going to happen in 2024? Are these people going to be reelected? Is the same machine's going to go on? And not to mention the long-term effects of these, shots, which I can't talk about because YouTube will take down this video. Their whole system is just crumbling down. And it seems like their system is going through some kind of a battle within each other, I guess a civil war, because this leads me to another topic, which is CCSD. And by the way, a lot of public money went to the Culinary Workers Union, and the Culinary Workers Union has an assemblywoman who works for her who also got appointed. And by the way, when I went to her house and a family member invited me inside her property, they called the police on me like 30, 40 days later, even though the family member invited me over and they made false accusations on me. It's just disgusting and despicable how these people are. These people need to be held accountable. They need to be essentially be brought to the ground where they're embarrassed. They can't even do their job. It's disgusting how these people are. Confront them. Get in their face. And it doesn't matter how much they try to put your lives in jeopardy, because people have to do the dirty work and get things done. Absolutely. But anyway, the CCSD is in trouble. The CCEA, the Clark County Education Association, by the way, this is another reason why I keep parroting, we have to break up Clark County. The system is not working. It's not that the county is so large and overpopulated. It's the fact that it's a monopolistic central control. So now in the last two meetings, which I'm going to attend the next one to see the circus, they're having so much disturbance that's happening because they're not raising their pay. Okay, now, first of all, a lot of my friends have looked at their pay. Some of these people who were shouting and interrupting these meetings, they're making over six figures. I mean, we have these administrators that are making well over $200,000. People like me don't have incomes that are like 1/5, 1/4 the amount. And we're still getting by here in Las Vegas very comfortably. We're still having a lot of money for savings. So the question is, well, what are they complaining about? They're just a bunch of spoiled children who are just complaining that they have to take some kind of cut because the cost of living is going up. But aren't they responsible? Aren't they responsible because they voted for these politicians who pushed the lockdowns and the mandates and the spending bills, which cause supply chain issues and the value of the dollar to be in jeopardy? See, they have responsibility. And shouldn't they be talking about what's causing the inflation instead about complaining like a bunch of babies about, oh, yeah, we need pay increases? It's just absolutely disgusting, folks. People need to go there and confront the hell out of these people. Unbelievable. So it seems like there's a civil war. And I can tell you this, man. The question is, why are these people getting reelected into these positions? We really need to do something to fight back. And by the way, the main problem with these schools, the heart of it, is really the parents, the parental involvement, the way these kids are being raised. That's the heart of the problem. That's the harsh truth that nobody's talking about. How many percent of these students are being raised in middle-class families and above with good family structure? I can tell you that that number is a pretty slim minority. It's just a circus. And I'm hoping that this division will lead to some effect and some change that we could get in 2024, which, by the way, 2024 is coming along. All these indictments, they're not working. They're not getting anywhere. They're not able to get Trump. Of course, is there a lot of things that I dislike about Trump? Absolutely. But I think that he has brought in some difference in how this country is being run. You can see it with immigration. You can see it with trade. And no matter how many times they try to grill him, no matter how many times they push around, he's still standing. And a lot of polls showing that he's actually leading. The same polls that showed him that he was 10 points behind about 4 years ago. And we can see how this election is going to end up playing. Now, there's some things I do admire about Robert Kennedy. He's gaining in the polls. He's starting to awaken a lot of the Democrats. Now, again, the Kennedy family, again, my issue is that his uncle, Ted Kennedy, was the one that pushed the 1965 Hart-Celler Act on immigration. But then again, you can also argue that the Kennedys have a lot of issues, particularly Robert Kennedy, that I actually admire, that I think it would be so much better than the current, whoever is really in office, because we know that our energy, our anger should be based on who is really pulling the strings. But the Trump momentum is growing. More and more people are waking up. They're really seeing, and I think that the issue that I believe is going to really increasingly wake more and more people up is, of course, COVID. And somebody just commented about Vivek. Yeah, I don't really trust him. And I've actually heard that, believe it or not, he wants to increase legal immigration, which I'm not in favor of. Let's be honest here. So I think really we should have a immigration moratorium for the most part, because I mean, if you look at the housing prices, if you just look at real estate as a whole, why do we need more people when we have these sky high real estate and rental costs? It absolutely doesn't make sense. But before I get into that, I want to get into the illegal immigration situation, because it's absolutely disgusting that the politicians continue to defend them. They act like there's nothing going wrong. All of these efforts, the chaos at the border, that's why I'm not really worrying about it too much, because it's backfiring. More and more people are waking up. All these inner cities are being overrun. They're getting a taste of their medicine. They didn't really want to do that. Remember, they wanted to push this in the red areas because they have lower costs of living, they have more jobs available, and they wanted to politically change those states. However, the problem is that they're not becoming what they're supposed to be. And you can see how there's all these organizations out here in Vegas that are defending them. They're saying, oh, it's illegal on stolen land. Nobody is that illegal. And I'm just like, well, first of all, everybody in terms of people, much of the world has conquered each other. Get it over it. And this country is successful because it was built primarily by Europeans on a European model. That's why my relatives have come here. But we know that obviously, yeah, LVCVA reported record gaming revenue, and I'll get to that later on. But it all comes down to this, because we still have assembly people who are defending these people, okay? And it really comes to my mind. It says, like, listen, would you support, E-Verify? Would you support what Florida did? Think about this. It's about time we get this through. Now, let's go to the strip economy. Now, it's hard to believe that we're having record revenue. It really is. Now, when they mean gaming revenue, a lot of people argue that's kind of skewed because a lot of people are gaming remotely. When I go to the strip, it's not jam-packed busy. I rarely see it compared to what I used to see many, many years ago, pre-2020. And I don't blame them. Essentially, what we have it's too much nickel and diming, at least for a lot of properties. The service has gone downhill. I told you how a lot of red flags are emerging, that I spoke to the Better Business Bureau. I submitted complaints that multiple people, along with YouTube, are reporting that hotel security is increasingly becoming negligent, especially the Venetian and Palazzo. So we have to really increasingly bring that up. But I don't believe that there is really gaming revenue, especially on the strip with this inflation that we're having. People are maxing on their credit cards. Eventually, this is going to really, really backfire. And what does this really, really mean? Because, they can try to bring all the events and attractions as they want. But when people don't have disposable income, because now we're seeing that savings is coming down, people are maxing their credit cards, it's not looking good. Now, even if tourism volume doesn't go down, because this leads me to the next point. There's another property that's being proposed, because there's one along Harmon. There's one being proposed along Mandalay. There's some that are being proposed outside of the strip. Not to mention, Fontainebleau is finishing up very, very soon. And more importantly, there's one that's being proposed that's planning to replace the Casino Royale. I believe that's what it's called. I don't know if you know what that is. It's one of these Victorian era Queen Anne styled casinos that's in between the Harris and the Venetian. And they want to implode those structures, which I think they're very pretty structures. And they want to build a high rise. So why is this very important? Because if they build more properties and we don't see an increase in visitation, that's going to take away a lot of traffic away from existing properties. And that may encourage more and more people to essentially experience more visitation gaps. In other words, more vacancies, lower occupations, occupancy rates. And that's going to hurt them very, very hard. I don't see this thing going further. Not to mention, as you know, I've talked about in the last 2-3 years, the shots. I'm not going to go further in depth, which is going to create more and more, essentially, pilot shortages and visitor shortages. Pretty much. That's what we're going to see. And this leads me to other aspect of the economy, which is going to be the real estate sector. Now, as you know, home prices have slipped slightly since about a year ago. Now, remember, we're not seeing too much of a downturn in the last few months because it's the summer buying season. So we'll have to see how September, October, November rolls out. Now, a lot of people are saying that people are not listing their homes on the market because simply, as you know, they don't want to get rid of their lower interest rates. You know, they don't want to buy another property that has a higher interest rate. Look, when people are being maxed out on their credit cards, when their property taxes are going up, when you see that there is higher costs of maintenance, HOA, insurance, the list goes on. Mortgage alone is not the sole factor when it comes to buying properties. It's just not. Okay, because when people tell you that, they're not telling you the whole enchilada of what exactly is going on. Okay, that's just a segment that you have to really keep in mind. Now, why haven't we seen a lot of homes being released in the market? Well, I think a lot of that is just simply that, first of all, a lot of these people, they need more time. That's one factor. And there's also a factor of, eventually when a lot of people can't qualify for these higher mortgage rates, they're going to have to start lowering their prices. Okay. But I think that over time, when people are going to have to retire, when there's going to be, if we have job losses, when we have a lot of people that, are not able to make ends meet, there is going to be more and more homes released in the market. This cannot go on. And people will say, well, investors will just scoop them up. Well, however, when people are not getting the return on the investment on their rental properties, the fact of the matter is that they're going to have to be releasing those properties as well. Not to mention there's going to be more housing construction. That can bring some more competition into the system. And then when that brings downward pressure, when we see even people who are so-called experts on the real estate, who are not so pessimistic, saying that there's going to be a 10, 20% reduction, eventually this will lead to more downward pressure. And not to mention, we've got other factors. We're seeing population contraction because of the you-know-what shots. I think that's going to play a role. We have 3D printing for construction. That's going to bring some competition into the market. And then when we see that downward pressure, when we see negative equity, we're going to see a lot more and more people who are going to not pay their mortgage payments. And then eventually they're going to be able to, yes, I know mortgages are different than what they were 15 years ago, but you can still have home price declines even when you have better mortgages. We saw that in the early 90s in some parts of the country, and that was during the savings and loan scandal. They also were telling you this similar mantra back in 2006 and 2007. But we saw home prices slid down slowly, and then they began to accelerate really in 2008. But we have a lot of these people saying that home prices are just not going to fall. But bottom line is they're very overvalued. And the income and home price ratio, and I mean especially when you look at one person income and you look at mortgage payments, that ratio, I believe, is at its all-time highs. And home builders are going to be coming in. And I don't think that they're going to be doing extremely well, because I think that their problem is a lot of people increasingly don't want to buy homes that have construction defects, that don't have a lot of charm and beauty, and they're coming up with all these amenities with these HOAs that people don't really need. I think the word is really getting out there. I think more people are really starting to wake up and realize that, well, these builders are not what they used to be. And I hope that more and more people like myself, like I plan on to do, want to build alternative home builders, just like we're seeing this parallel economy to alternative food producers, alternative social media platforms. You know, we have this parallel economy, and people are going through alternative financial systems, you know, institutions, currencies, and so forth. Although, you know, cryptos are not even the vast majority of my portfolio. Let's just be honest here. So now this leads me to another topic, because a lot of the builders are pressuring that the disposal boundary, which is set by the Bureau of Land Management, because remember, about 85% of the land in the state of Nevada is owned and controlled by the federal government. And there's a bipartisan bill that's being pushed through. I mean, environmentalists, they oppose. However, we have Cortez Masto that wants to expand federal land because, as you know, that there's a interest by developers to expand the land supply. Now, you could argue that she's in the pockets of developers. I would have done the same. Actually, I would just get rid of the disposal boundary. I think that there shouldn't be a boundary where it says where you can and cannot build. Like, it creates kind of like an island around the Las Vegas Valley. And they want to expand the boundary, and that includes the valley that I'm interested in building. I've been talking about this for over 10 years now, that I want to build my dream master plan neighborhood, and we would establish our own city, county consolidation. We have an alternative way of, you know, land use, transportation, architecture, and so forth. So I have to applaud her for doing that. But this all goes back to these environmentalists that say, no, we shouldn't spread out, we should just build up. And I tell them, well, listen, when you do that, you limit the supply of land, prices go up, and you have to understand why people want to spread out. Well, for one, the homes we build are not that good quality. They easily get outdated. Two, of course, the fact that the existing areas, they decay, crime goes up, you have demographic change, you have a lot of white flight. And not to mention, people want to get away from, you know, other things like pollution and so forth. But also, we have codes and regulations. And I know Clark County is updating and improving their general plan, such as parking minimums. We've got a whole lot of other things, you know, mandates for arterials, that, you know, these middle routes that split up the neighborhoods, that create more car dependent urban planning. And that causes more and more of this spread out development that they don't like. So what you should be doing is you should be getting rid of the codes, subsidies, and so forth that encourage this system. Now, I wanted to tell you this. I did join the local chapter of Strong Towns, which I don't agree everything that they do. Just because they're alternatives doesn't mean that they're the real deal. However, I think it's important for me to get the word across. And I do believe we should pass the new bill that allows more land for development, because that will bring in more supply of land, that will bring downward pressure on home prices. And hopefully, you know, these 3D printers, these boxables, and so forth, they'll be able to increase housing supply. And honestly, I don't even think Vegas home prices should be expensive at all, to be honest with you. I mean, we're not geographically, physically limited in land supply like Malibu or Manhattan, Hawaii, and you can pretty much see what they did recently in the last 3-4 weeks. And I'm going to get to that to another video. I mean, the fact that, by the way, the cop who was taking part of Route 91 is part of Maui, it just explains everything, folks. Really, let's just be honest here. But I think that the land supply should expand, and we should be able to get the word out there and bring alternatives to urban planning. Because if you really want to stop spread out development, for one thing, is you have to control your border, because more of these illegals come in. It's going to mean people of European descent, or people like me, as a matter of fact, will continue to want to spread out because we like to live with people like ourselves. Okay? This is why you get Henderson, Summerlin, Centennial, and Boulder City. And you might argue why Boulder City limits growth, because they don't want demographic change. Get over it. There's a multicultural festival that's coming in the Clark County grounds next weekend. I'm going to be there. And we have to tell people the multiculturalism is not working as well as we were led to believe. Yeah. And it's happening around the world. I mean, I look at reports where Saudi Arabia, Japan, China, Israel, you have all these black migrants that are getting there. They're treating them like crap. They're killing them. And I bet Persians like us would have done the same. We don't like them. We like to be with people like ourselves. Okay? Even in the last 2-3 years, we Persians have deported many Afghan refugees. I mean, we speak the same language. Many of them do. But we're just not like each other, okay? And you want to call me racist, you want to call me supremacist, listen, you're just really showing your insanity. I'm just going to be honest here. But my problem is there's a double standard, okay? When we do it as Americans or Canadians or Australians, and especially Europeans, we're treated differently. That's where the problem is. And I'm sick of it. Okay? And it's just the fact that less fortunate people who are from countries that are a mess or countries that have generous welfare programs, want to just suck up the resources that we have. And it's just not going to work. And what's going to happen is that the Saudis, the Japanese, the Chinese, and by the way, I can show you a video where they were using the N-word at the blacks. They're going to have to pay for those people. Just like, my aunt is going to have to pay for those Afghans, because I believe that they are a taxpayer burden, and we are paying for those illegals or Africans or Amerindians or whatever you want to call them, Guatemalans, Haitians. I'm sick of it. I really am. And what do we get as a result? We get, destabilization. We get people that are not like ourselves. It's very simple. And this leads to this other topic that I want to talk about. And by the way, if you really want good mass transit, which I've talked about before, unless if it's personal rapid transit, which I want to promote in my project. If you want to promote heavy rail, if you're going to have a multicultural society, it's just not going to work. Because a lot of people don't like to use mass transit services with people that are not like themselves. It's just the sad reality. And even when you're driving, you bring all those types of drivers that, drive differently like you. But I want to get to this other topic, which is inflation. Inflation, look, first of all, with these rising gas prices, because I'm really pissed off. I don't know exactly what's going on. I hear it's OPEC, Saudi Arabia. I mean, this country, oh my gosh. And by the way, have you heard that Iran and Saudi Arabia, they're joining BRICS because they're trying to get out of the US dollar? I mean, folks, this thing, I have a feeling it's going to end all this other BS problems we have in America. Because if this thing gets out of hand and we start to feel economic pain, a lot of the problems that we hear with open borders, the decline of the family, I'm hearing more on YouTube that dating has become such a mess and nobody is starting good family structure anymore. This is really going to change America as a whole. And of course, the long-term effects of COVID as well. But anyway, inflation is getting out of control. Saudi Arabia is cutting production, apparently, or you can argue it's those speculators on Wall Street, but oil prices are going up. And this is sad. This is a disgrace. we really have a problem here, folks. I'm getting really concerned about this. And I just have to say that, this is going to put a strain on consumers. Now, luckily, my new job is less than a mile away, and I drive a Toyota Corolla, so I'm not really concerned, to be honest with you. However, it's going to affect the economy because these people are going to have lower purchasing power, and this could affect, the businesses and everything else that I depend on. This could add upward pressure on doing business. Their costs go up. So, and now I don't think food prices are necessarily going to keep going up because I think the supply chain issues are recovering. We are starting to see, drought conditions, from what I've seen, begin to improve and things like that. However, here's the problem. Okay, the inflation rate as a result is not going to come down. And this leads me to the Inflation Reduction Act. It's not doing what it's supposed to do. And of course, we know that the Inflation Reduction Act didn't really get to the heart of the problem, which was the supply chain issues, which these same crap politicians brought in because they were issuing the lockdowns and everything else, because they don't want to admit that that was the cause, because if they did, we would see how all their COVID measures was really just for what they were. But what I was really trying to get across is that the inflation rate is not going to come down, and this is going to get really ugly going into 2024. Unbelievable. People are really fed up with this. So the question is, this all leads to the price of oil, and the US was energy independent about 2 years ago. Couldn't have the United States increased oil production domestically? Because again, the United States is still exporting a lot of their oil, because that's another problem, to make sure that we have enough supply here in America to basically drive down eventually the price of gasoline. And this is another reason why I'm a critic of current urban planning, because, unless if you live in a large lot detached home, you shouldn't have to depend on gasoline all the time for getting around. It's ridiculous. Yeah. And we're seeing electric cars are not, we're told, what they're supposed to be. Now, the thing about the inflation rate, though, is the fact that it has come down. And I do believe that these higher interest rates are not going to bring just downward pressure on the real estate market. But I think that they're going to get to the point where they're going to stop raising them. And when they stop raising them, it's going to be more bullish in the stock market. We're seeing the stock market beginning to recover. I can see that the NASDAQ is going to touch and pass its all-time highs that it hit in late 2021. And we're likely going to see new highs coming forward. Now, do I think that this bull market is going to go on for several years? I don't see that, because I've been telling you this for over 10 years, is that if the real estate market continues to struggle even more, then that's going to bring more downward pressure in the economy. And by the way, the savings rate, however, is coming down. People are maxing their credit cards, and I think this will take about a year or so, or could be 9 months from now at the minimum, for that to really start to take effect in corporate earnings and corporate profits. Okay. Now remember, the deficit spending is very, very high, and the earnings are still looking pretty decent. And that these are bullish indicators for the US stock market. However, if these metrics start to change, then we can start seeing downward pressure in the stock market. And I would advise people to sell, and we could see a buying opportunity, for a year or so from the next peak that we're going to see in the stock market. So, and we're really starting to see the NASDAQ, particularly these tech giants, begin to perform pretty well. we'll have to really see how this all plays out. But once again, as for right now, uh, even though we had the BRICS summit, I am not super bullish on commodities. And I would just make sure that I'm more bullish in the general stock market, because I did see a chart saying that people are less bullish in the stock market than they are among real estate and commodities. Because usually, when people are the most pessimistic on an investment class, that's the one that you really most likely would like to get into. So, all right, I got to wrap it up. It's been 40 minutes. So let me just read the comments right here. I talked about LVCVA. I'm never going to ride the bus. Yeah, buses are a secondhand system, and the frequency is so low. I mean, I read a chart about saying that mass transit in other parts of the world is much better. And to build subway lines in a country like Spain, it's 1/10 typically the cost of the United States. So they really have to look into that, because I really believe a lot of the funds for not just transit but freeway systems, a lot of that money is being money laundered. So this is where you get a high dependence on these arterials, these 45-mile-an-hour routes, collectors, stroads, whatever you want to call them. Yeah, China owned 30% of the farmland in America. Yeah, that's true. But I obviously, as you know, a lot of state legislatures are fighting back. That's good on them. Public transit is extremely dangerous until we speak about the truth about a lot of other things. Then we can really see how mass transit is going to work. Now, in a place like California, look, California is going to have to increase its housing density stock along the coast, and it's going to have to put more mass transit, for really you're going to see more supply, and then the prices come down. But unfortunately, despite the fact that you hear about California, oh, they're environmentally extremist, they want people to live in cramped quarters, California still makes it very difficult with the CEQA and everything else to build up, not just out. And I'll do a video about that very, very soon. Michael Blurry has a huge short position. Yeah. Well, again, we'll have to see why they did that. I mean, just because they say they're selling, it doesn't necessarily mean the market's going to come down. I have to see a lot of investors to start selling, and then we can really see the difference that will come into play. All right, everybody. Got any last questions? I'll stay in live for a very long period of time. I'll wrap it up in about a minute. What do you guys think? Got any other questions you want to talk about? Any other comments you would like to talk about? I'm going to wrap this up in about a minute or 30 seconds. All right, everybody. Okay, well, thank you guys so much. I appreciate it. Please stay tuned. Ooga booga. Yeah, man. It's just, I don't know, man. I got to say about that situation, I was at Fashion Show Mall, which is a mall along the strip. And I feel like they've taken over that mall. See, that's the problem. It's like a lot of people don't want to go to the malls because of safety concerns and everything. So it's just sad to see a lot of our public venues or common areas are just being taken over like this. Yeah. All right, guys. I'll see you soon. Have fun.